Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Morning, Commodore fans. Welcome into Vandy247 Live here on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside a special guest we'll get to here in just a second. We're talking more basketball today, and as always, that's brought to you by The Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at The Wash House take care of that for you. They've got 2 convenient locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. Well, long-awaited episode for Vandy fans today. We're going to be joined by Vanderbilt legend Will Perdue, obviously 4-time NBA champ. We'll talk all things Vanderbilt basketball, get an idea of what he's got going on these days as well. I'm sure he's over the moon about this season, as many Vanderbilt fans and supporters are. Next game Saturday, Vanderbilt in Norman, Oklahoma. They got this week off, so no midweek game. They'll be in Norman, Oklahoma to play the Sooners on Saturday. So looking forward to that. Without further ado, we're going to bring in Mr. Will Perdue now to join the show. Will, how you doing?
Billy, I'm doing great. I need to find a wash house here in Chicago so my wife and I don't have to do the laundry. But I will say that I actually enjoy doing the laundry because I find some gratification in, folding clean clothes, knowing that you've actually accomplished something. So As you get older, it's the little things that make the big difference.
Yeah, well, I don't know what we'd do without the wash house. We've been they've been good to us. Hopefully, we've been good to them. But Will, Vanderbilt basketball has been good to a lot of people this year so far. I know you've been locked in. Before we get into any of that, I know Vanderbilt fans are always interested to see what alums are doing and former players have going on. What do you have going on now? I know a lot of people know that you're up there in Chicago with the Bulls and doing some pre and post game stuff, but just give Vanderbilt fans an idea of what you've got going on, especially now that Vanderbilt's got a pretty good basketball product as well.
I live in Chicago now. My wife and I actually are in the city. We're in the northern part of the city. Some people probably ask why, especially this time of year. We actually have a heat wave going on as it's above freezing today on Tuesday, January 28th. So that's a good day and the sun's out. But my wife is from LaGrange, so that's a suburb of the area. And, she's one of 5. Her mom's one of 11. So there's a big, congregation of her family here. So that's why we're here. And, we have a lot of nieces and nephews. So we got basketball games. We got baseball games. So that's kind of why we're here. This is now basketball season. We got a nephew that plays basketball. I love going to the games. And I also work for a podcast. How about that? Called CHGO. It's a company called All City out of Denver. And it's related to the Chicago Bulls. We do pregame shows, postgame shows. I'm not part of the guys that do daily podcasts just like you're doing here. Mm-hmm. I just do game day events. Then I also work for Westwood One Radio and do college games, NIT tournament, NCAA tournament, individual regular season games, and then do some motivational speaking and, actually try to, here, let me see. Birdie, come here. Come here. This is our new project now. Come here. Come here. I try not to go podcast. Come here. Come here.
Come on, Birdie.
She thinks that I want to put her in her crate, so she's avoiding me. But eventually, I'll bring her in during the podcast.
Awesome.
She'll come over here and jump up in my lap to sniff around to see what's going on. And here she comes. Come here. So we actually have a puppy here. Come on.
Oh, man.
Here we go. See, there's Birdie.
Oh, she's cute. Hey, Birdie.
A almost 9-month-old boxer puppy. And Birdie is her name. And yes, she is named Birdie after the golf term. So
I love it.
My wife
said,
hey, I think Birdie's pretty cool. Bogies. I said, you can't name a dog Bogey. Can't do that. It's wrong mindset. But so that's kind of what we do. And I try to sneak away. I just got back from Scottsdale. Try to sneak away for golf trips here or there during the wintertime. But that's really about it. And, as you said, spending a lot more time. I watched every single football game this year. Did not get to a game, unfortunately, but did watch every single game. And so far, I've watched all the basketball games. So I've had to, I know it's unfortunate that I'm admitting that there's some times in the past that I wasn't watching a lot of Vandy sports. But needless to say, I've had to carve some time out and make sure that it's kind of like, make sure in your schedule it says Vandy game, what time, specifically on Saturdays, during the football season, and now, during the week and on weekends for basketball.
Well, obviously, everybody knows, especially, Vanderbilt fans that watched you play from 1983 to 88, stud here in Nashville, 1988 SEC Player of the Year, led Vanderbilt to the first Sweet 16 appearance in school history. That's something that, first Sweet 16 appearance, that's something that I think is possible this year. I've told some people that, and they might have thought I was crazy when I said that. And, it was after the Kentucky game. But for you, watching this basketball season so far, and I want to get into some of the football season as well, but for you, what you did at Vanderbilt, now watching this basketball team perform, and let's face it, we haven't seen a product like this for 5, 6, maybe even 7 years inside Memorial Gym, and now they're ranked in the top 25. Just what has this season so far been like for you as a guy that loves and cares for this program?
Well, I think, it's kind of funny while you were talking about that. I was like, what word really best describes what I'm feeling? And, I don't think you're going to thought this word would be coming out of my mouth, but I mean, quite honestly, it's just refreshing because it's, listen, it's for football, trying to get 90 guys, organized, motivated, get that much talent is very difficult. You always think as a former player, and we have these conversations in text threads, phone calls, why is it so difficult to get 12 guys that are talented to play basketball at Vanderbilt? That shouldn't be an issue, And quite honestly, how many of those guys need to be really, really good? 3? You just need to have a solid D1 player and then 3 really good, probably NBA prospect guys. Now, the interesting thing is people be like, hey, but you had a team that had a bunch of NBA guys that just didn't do very well. And obviously there was a lot of discourse, when Jerry Stackhouse was there because he had some talent. If you look at some of his rosters, you're like, there's guys all over the league. So it's just one of those things is just not only getting the guys, but then getting the right coach and providing the proper leadership. And, it's just been fun to watch. It's been very enjoyable getting to know Coach Byington and having conversations with him. It's been very enjoyable getting to know, guys on his staff, how eager they are to get this, program back to where it was. And, literally when you talk about the Tennessee game and the Kentucky game, I understand they still got to do some work on, outside of the student section, getting more Vandy fans into the building, but just even getting to the point where now you're getting the students back to the games and the atmosphere is now back. It's really fun to watch, and it's really like exciting, and it really almost brings a tear to your eye when you hear the commentators talk about the atmosphere that's now been developed and how it just kind of reminds you of, back in the days, when you had Stallings and my coach, C.M. Newton, guys that, consistently put a good product on the floor every single night.
Well, you mentioned Byington, and he publicly stated that he had a conversation with you as soon as he got the job, and I think he mentioned that it was over an hour, and that he really appreciated that, and I'm glad that was well documented, because for him, I'm sure he needed that. I'm sure you loved to provide that, and I'm interested, like, you don't have to reveal the secrets, but like what was that like for you, and how excited were you when he was hired to kind of have a chance to talk to him and help him in this process?
Yeah, I mean, Billy, I don't mind talking about it. I mean, it was nothing secretive. It wasn't like you had to get security clearance for us to have that discussion. I've gotten to the point in my life, I'm 59 years old. I'll actually be 60 years old this year. 60. I mean, it's just, I can honestly say that, my friend base, when I say friend base, like people that are kind of like in that inner circle, 95% of them are all Vandy people, former Vandy students, Vandy teammates, the whole thing. So even when things aren't going well, we talk Vandy sports a lot, right? Former football players, obviously teammates, regular students. That's my friend base, right? And I just, quite honestly, felt like I wanted to make sure that Mark knew what he was up against. It's as much as I think about, what Vanderbilt means to me and the time that I spent on campus. And I'll always be very thankful for that, especially to, my parents that, kind of helped lead me to Vanderbilt, C.M. Newton, Kazan Kowalczyk, who was a professor of mine that kind of took me under his wing in the communication department, and the things I learned. That's athletics at Vanderbilt is just it's a different animal. Okay. It's not what athletics is like at Tennessee or Georgia or Alabama. It's not. Okay. But I'm not trying to disparage it at any means. And I understand I mentioned like those teams were like, athletics is number one, period. But I mentioned those schools because I think that Vanderbilt, I'm not saying we can be as good as those schools on a consistent basis, but we should make it just as important as they do, and that's always been, how I felt about it. So I wanted to have a conversation with Mark and let him know what he's going to be up against. It's not just, hey, do whatever, whenever, however. There's going to be restrictions. There's going to be limitations. There's going to be a lot of, doors that should be open for you that are going to be closed. And you're going to have to find a way to open those doors and get through them. And, I think it's still early, but one of the best ways to open those doors is to win. And he's done that. And I think the fact that what he's done is remarkable, that he basically has brought in a whole new roster and trying to put that roster together at warp speed to play in the best conference in the country and actually be in that position to win the games they've already won, to now raise the level of expectation. That's the other thing that he realizes this, right? Is that you heard in that post-game speech in the locker room after they beat Kentucky, guys, this is not the end game. We're just getting started. The SEC schedule is murderer's row. It is just one night after another. There's no off night, right? I mean, we all sat there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, but as former players, when we're looking at the schedule and we're thinking, hey, maybe this one's, they're not Alabama, they're not Kentucky, they're not Tennessee, they're Missouri, but they're kind of down a little bit. Maybe that Missouri game is a game we should win. Well, they made a hell of a run to get back into the game, but they couldn't win. But then all of a sudden, the Missouri team that's supposedly down, if I remember correctly, not only is Vanderbilt ranked 24th, but Missouri's ranked 20th, aren't they?
Yep.
So all of a sudden, you're talking about two teams that weren't supposed to be that good in the SEC are ranked in the top 25. It's just, from top to bottom, it's just, I talked to one of the coaches via text after the Kentucky game, and they were just like, thank God we got an off week, in the sense that they don't, as you pointed out at the beginning of the podcast, just it's kind of giving them a chance to kind of catch their breath.
Yeah.
Right? You think about Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi State. What's their record now? All of a sudden I'm drawing a blank. They're 500, right?
Yes, they are 4-3 in the SEC.
Okay,
actually.
4-3. And of those 7 games, how many of them have actually been against an unranked opponent?
South Carolina, and that might be it. I think that's it. The South Carolina game.
Yeah, because Missouri
or LSU as well.
Yeah, LSU, but still winning on the road at LSU, you could say, oh yeah,
right.
yeah. But what people don't realize, the toughest games to win, regardless of your opponent, are the ones you're supposed to win.
Right.
Because all the expectations are on one side of the table, and those, regardless of the opponent, regardless of how good they are. That's why you see upsets all the time. It's just those are the toughest games to win, and to actually go into LSU as the better team. And I know we're not supposed to talk about gambling, but it's a huge part of the sports landscape. I think Vanderbilt was actually favored, even though they went into Baton Rouge, right? And they stepped up and they won. And it's nice to sit down as a former player to watch a game with expectations of, I expect this team to win, regardless of who they're playing. I fully expect them to win. I'm not just sitting down going, I'll watch, see what it looks like, see maybe if, tonight's the night that they pull an upset. It's like, no, I'm sitting down with the expectation that this team is going to win. Now I'm watching a game with, okay, let's find out how they figure out how to win this game. And that's, as I said, that's been refreshing, enjoyable. It's just been, and being able to text with guys and everybody else is watching the game as well.
Well, with this team, before the season, I think a lot of us were wondering what their identity would be. Is this going to be a high-scoring offense type team, with an up-paced tempo, high-paced tempo, or is this going to be more of a defensive team that likes to slow it down? We knew Byington's style, but as the season's gone along, feels like this team, when they're forcing turnovers and getting out in transition, is when they're having success. Now, they've got a lot of good shooters as well. But when you watch this team, what do you think their identity is? Because to me, it feels like they're very flexible and malleable in how they can play. They slowed it down a little bit with Kentucky, and Tennessee. They played physical with Kentucky as well. So when you watch this team, what are some, you mentioned an adjective, refreshing. They're a word that makes you think, that's how you feel about this team right now. What's their identity in your mind?
Defense. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. And, their best defensive players are freshmen. That right there is impressive. But at the same time, that's identifying talent. And you made a valid point. Coaching is strong too. They've adapted their style, because that's one of the things. I love watching games. I love breaking games down, as an analyst doing stuff with the Bulls, trying to figure things out, right? Like when you face an opponent, you can't just say, okay, this is who we are. This is what we do. Let's go out and do it. It's not that easy. You have to look at an opponent and you have to say, okay, who is Tennessee? Who is Kentucky? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do we have to attack them? Teams that aren't good enough to adapt are the teams that basically just put the same product on the floor every night, hoping to win, right? This is who we are. This is how we have to play. Hopefully we'll win. Teams that have depth, teams that have talent, teams that are put together properly, they have the ability to adapt on a nightly basis, as you just said, malleable, right? Flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Played up tempo against Tennessee, slowed it down a little bit, found a way to grind, played really physical against Kentucky. Won both those games. That says a lot for Byington and his staff, right? Number one, identifying a game plan. Number two, a game plan that's successful. Number three, the ability to have a group of guys that can execute the game plan and see the bigger picture and understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. But also guys that believe in the game plan, believe in the coaching staff, understand that, hey, if we do what the coaches ask, that gives us our best opportunity to win. And the biggest thing about having a defensive identity is, as you said, there are some shooters on this team. But what we've seen so far is just, the 3-point shooting has been very inconsistent, right?
Mm-hmm.
The team is undersized because of injuries, but they've found a way to compete being undersized because you got some dogs down in the paint, right? Guys that just refuse to get out hustled for a rebound.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been able to take care of that aspect of the game because you were like, uh-oh, this could be a huge problem. And initially it was, but they've addressed it, right? They've learned how to rebound as a team, okay? So that to me is, everybody currently on the same page. But that's also easy to say when you're winning. So you're going to hit a stretch here where you're probably going to lose a game or two that maybe you shouldn't, or a game that you had an opportunity to win, but you didn't. That can fracture a locker room and can fracture relationships on the business side. When I say business side, I mean basketball itself, not NIL, anything of that nature, just on the business side of basketball, of belief in the system and what's going on. But I think right now you got guys that see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the more we win, the better I as a player look. And that's what these guys all want. They want to look good, right? Because now everybody in the league feels like they can play at the next level.
You mentioned it. I mean, it's never easy in the SEC. A couple of tough road games coming up at Oklahoma, at Florida on Tuesday, Texas on February the 8th, and then number 1 Auburn. We'll see if they're still number 1 coming in on a Tuesday night here soon as well. But, I mean, what's the ceiling here for this team? Man, maybe we don't even know yet. There's still a lot of basketball left, Will, but I told somebody the other day, I think this team could do some damage in March. I don't know that there's a 2 seed. Like if Vanderbilt gets a 7 seed, for example, I don't think there's a 2 in the next round that would want to see this Vanderbilt team. What do you think the ceiling is for this team, and what's their potential in March?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Billy, because I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday that if things go well, I could see Vanderbilt getting, a 7 or 8 seed. Right?
Yeah.
That exact scenario because of just, the net rating, all the different factors that go into picking teams, supposedly blind draw, when they're placing these teams in the, in the field of 60,
Right.
68, technically. I think you're starting to see that this team is better than people thought. I will say this. In my conversations with, Coach Byington leading up to the season, he kept talking about people don't realize how much, he kept saying, he goes, I don't get it, man. People just don't realize how talented this team is. He's, and every coach says that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, we got a lot of talent. People just don't understand. But it was just the way he was. It wasn't like he was trying to sell it to me. He was telling me, like he truly believed it. You could feel it, that he believed this team had talent. The biggest thing he said, and that's going to be something that he's going to fight all year. And it's not just him. I mean, it's Pearl at Auburn, right? It's, Pope at Kentucky. They're all fighting the same thing. If these guys will put their personal goals aside and put the team goals first, the ceiling is unlimited, quite honestly. It's when something happens where somebody all of a sudden loses focus on what it is they're really trying to do, is when things start to fall apart. The focus is the team goal. The team goal is winning. And the hardest thing to convince a player to do consistently, night in and night out, is to make sacrifices. And unfortunately for a lot of these guys, that's sacrificing rebounds, sacrificing points, sacrificing assists. You're like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, for example, we're talking about, how Vanderbilt's done a nice job of addressing, lack. They don't have a 7-footer. What's the biggest guy on the roster? 6'8" now?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So as a big, and I used to have to do this at times when I was guarding, Shaquille O'Neal, or if I was, guarding Brad Daugherty with the Cavs, I have to forgive my numbers, meaning my job is just keep Shaq off the boards at all costs and allow somebody else to get the rebound. Does that look good in the box score? Absolutely not. But if we win, it looks good to the coaches. That's all. Hey, I did my job, and something I did, as small as it may be, allowed us to win. I, as a shooter, if I was a shooter, if I have what I consider a good shot, but if I make the extra pass to a great shot, that doesn't help. That doesn't help me from a points per game standpoint, but that helps me in the win column. And that's the hard part, is consistently selling these guys on the word sacrifice, because guys have a tendency, with whether it's their parents, whether it's their boys, whether it's their peeps, their camp, telling them, hey man, we need more points per game out of you to look better, to get you to the next level, or you need more assists, or you need more free throw attempts. When you start making it personal, that's when you start to disrupt, the team chemistry, and that can create a lot of problems, not only amongst the coaches, but amongst the players. As long as you continue to buy in about the team atmosphere and making the necessary sacrifices, because of the talent that they do have, and because of they're malleable and they do play defense, the sky's the limit, because it's just, and I honestly mean that in the sense that you see some team makes a magical run every year in the NCAA, and everybody's like, man, I didn't see that coming. That team barely got into the tournament, but yet they're peaking at the right time and they make a nice little run.
Last thing for me, Will, you mentioned Memorial Gym and how, the atmosphere is back. And I think we've all seen that. Now there's another step in that, getting more of the local and maybe sidewalk fans in the gym. The students have been packing it, like you said. And I asked Byington after the game against Kentucky, like, why has it been so hard and challenging for Kentucky and Tennessee to come in here and beat you guys? He credited the students, talked about the students for 2-3 minutes. They've been a presence, of course, but from your experience, obviously Memorial Gym was at its peak when you played there. From your experience, how does that help you as a player? Because especially watching this team right now, when they're at Memorial, I mean, they're tough to beat. I know they lost to Mississippi State, but from your perspective, why is it tough? And you could probably see it at times on the opponent. They just get frustrated. And I know the coaches can roam the sideline now, didn't used to when you played, but why is it tough to win a Memorial Gym, especially when the crowd is as good as it has been for these last couple of home games?
Well, so the interesting thing is, like, one of the things I learned also in the NBA is that the fringe guys, meaning most of the time the guys that don't start, have a tendency to play better at home than they do on the road. I don't really have a definition for it, or a reason why. It is. And those are the guys, when you go back and you look at the Tennessee game or the Kentucky game, I wish I had a box score in front of me. There's one of those fringe guys that probably had one of the better games of their career or the season.
Collins.
That kind of pushed them over the top, right?
Yeah.
There's just this, it's really hard to quantify, but it's just the energy that you get from playing at home, the comfort. It's really understanding your surroundings, right? Do all players enjoy playing on the road? And most guys actually do, but there's distractions. They call it hostile territory, you know. And it's just human nature. Atmosphere affects officiating. It just does, because the officials are not robots, right?
Right.
And they're not. I've made claims. Current players made claims that they want one team or the other to win. This is it's like so many people right now are hating on the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Oh
Right.
my God, they just get all the calls, and I'm just like, oh, whatever, But it's just, as long as human nature is involved, there's always going to be these claims. But that's why the atmosphere at home is so important, because of how it not only affects the opponents, and these are teenagers, these are kids, these aren't grown men in their late 20s playing in the NBA. I mean, that playing on the road still affects them as well, because of the environment, because of the support. Knowing that, if you're not playing your best game, you can take energy from a crowd and it'll push you over the top, right? What was it Byington said? He had to call a psychiatric timeout.
So, yeah, psychology timeout. Yeah.
Psychology timeout, right? But it was what people that I haven't been in that huddle understand. Everybody in that huddle knows that Kentucky's on a huge run, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so you kind of regroup, you listen to what the coach says, but then it's when it's coming out of that huddle, the energy you feel coming out of that huddle, walking back onto the floor, and you look over and the fans are going nuts, and you look to the other side, and the season ticket holders are up clapping and pumping their fists, and you're like, all right, man, even though we all know what just happened and what's happening, and this is kind of slipping away, they're still with us. They're still behind us. They believe. And if they believe, we believe. That's just that's how it works. So I, as a former player and being part of that atmosphere that was sold out, you got to remember, when I got to Nashville in 1983, we weren't winning a lot of games. We were winning non-conference games, and we were lucky to go 500 in the SEC. But because of all the work that CM Newton had done outside of the halls, the walls of Memorial Gymnasium, of Kiwanis Club meetings, and just constantly beating the streets and generating interest, the place was sold out because of CM Newton. And eventually the product followed. But the fans helped mold that product, right? And helped it become a desirable place to go as a recruit. Now it's NIL is more involved, but for those that watch this podcast, I, as a former player, ask you, okay, we're doing a good job now of filling up the student section, whether it's used to be a T-shirt, free pizza, donuts. I mean, hell, I almost jumped on a plane and came down for a game because they were giving away Pancake Pantry one game, right? I was like, geez, that's some good, promotion.
That's good stuff.
But we got to now start taking the other areas behind the baskets, season ticket holders. We got to start filling those seats more with people that wear black and gold, people there that are cheer on the Commodores to win. And I know it takes time. And I told Mark, I said he was going to deal with this, to take this podcast full circle. What did I tell Mark? I said, you're not going to get many people to show up because there's a lot of other products there. There's the Titans, there's the Predators, there's the soccer team. I think you got the women's 5-on-5s getting ready to get started, right? That off-season, off WNBA season. So there's a lot of things you can do. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, I mean, I know you still got Belmont plays good basketball and Lipscomb plays good basketball, TSU, no disrespect, but if you really want to see Power 4 NBA quality players on a nightly basis, you got to go to Vanderbilt, right? And the product now is there. They're winning. So if you were saying, well, I'll go and they start winning, well, you need to get your butt and get in a seat because now they're winning. But also, as you just pointed out, Oklahoma, Texas, Auburn. People kept talking about, man, look what look what happened with football now that you got Texas and Oklahoma. Let's not forget about what it's done for basketball, how it's raised the bar. I know Oklahoma's kind of having a down season, but now the Bulls, Byington and his staff's got a week to prepare for Oklahoma. A game, remember what I said earlier, a game now that they're expected to win. And those are the hardest games to win. So the question is, how do they make the Oklahoma game different than the Missouri game? How do they make that game different than any other game that they haven't won this year when they're on the road? All right, and that's what they have to figure out, and that's what good teams do. It may not be pretty, but you just find a way to win and get the hell out of Dodge and get home.
There you have it. That's Will Perdue, 1988 SEC Player of the Year, former Vanderbilt legend, also four-time NBA champ, 3 with the Bulls, 1 with the Spurs as well. Will, this was awesome. Really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully Vanderbilt's able to keep it rolling and keep you excited up there, and who knows, maybe we get you down here for a game.
Well, I'll be down there for the Ole Miss game.
Okay.
We're doing like a reunion type weekend. A bunch of former players will be there, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to get there sooner. Kind of with my commitments up here, but I do have that on the schedule, and looking forward to actually watching them in person. But otherwise, it's must-watch TV at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate it. Have a good one, and maybe we'll talk soon.
All right, Billy, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, that's Will Perdue, Vanderbilt legend, former Chicago Bull as well. That was awesome. Getting his perspective on what's been going on with Coach Byington's team here in Nashville. And I know we got some questions. I tried to look at the questions that you guys had and try to pose those. I had about 30 in my mind for him, but really good stuff there from Will Perdue. I knew it would be. Tomorrow we'll have the roundtable episode. I know Luke Wyatt should be on, and we'll see if Chris has some time to hop on. Either way, we'll have an episode tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp. Thanks again for you guys' comments, your questions. Loved it. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Will there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. We've got our subscribers up to, I think, 2.07 right now on YouTube. So let's get that ramped up. Maybe get to 2.5 here before the end of the year, or at least before the end of the summer. How about that? Maybe we get it really ramped up. But give this podcast a review and a 5-star rating, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That helps us get noticed. And if you're listening and haven't subscribed to Vandy247.com yet, please do. We've got special offers all over the place. As I said, subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll get notified every time we go live with anything. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of Vandy 24/7 Live.